Okay, so what is a mark making chart and why would you want to make one? A mark making chart is something that allows you to not have any of the pressure on you about making a finished beautiful drawing or getting your proportions right or anything like that. A mark making chart is just an excuse to explore and experiment with your materials, to figure out what they do. In this video, I'm going to show you some examples of what some drawing supplies do, but there are many that you will not see me cover in this video just for the sake of brevity, but hopefully what is in this video will give you just an idea of some things that you can experiment with without the pressure of getting a technique right or anything like that. And that way, when you are working on your drawings, your figure drawings or your life drawings or your drawings from imagination, you'll have a kind of sense of what these materials are, what you can do with them. It's almost like a pencil right out of the packet or vine charcoal right out of the packet, just used by itself is kind of it's like the baseline model, but there's other things, there's other ways you can hold those materials, other ways you can interact with those materials, and other supplies that you can use with those materials that will give those materials a more unique quality. And I'd like for you to play around with that this semester and in this video. As you'll see from the template, the indication is to make this every 6 inches. So we're dividing 24 into 4 6-inch segments here. So I'm going to just put a little mark at 6, a little mark 12, a little mark at 18. And I'll do the same up at the top here. And then I'm just going to connect these lines. You can even take a sheet of Strathmore or some other paper and just fold it. So there's that 12-inch division, right? And then you could divide that in half. What I was actually about to start saying was you could fold your paper like this to give yourself a straight edge. When you fold paper enough times, it becomes like a very firm, nice straight edge. So if you don't have a ruler, you could do that. Or with this particular setup, you could just divide your paper, fold it on itself like this, because the measurements I'm giving you fit very nicely into this paper size. So dividing it in half, dividing it in half again, that gets you 6 inches, 6 inches, 6 inches, 6 inches. You get the idea. All right, so we're going to do the same this way. It won't work with a half measurement. It's thirds this time and not quarters. I'm not looking at these and thinking who has the most precise folded piece of paper. That's not what my interest is, and I don't want it to be what your interest is. I just want you to have the same number of divisions. So what do we have here? 3, 6, 9, 12. So as long as you have 12 divisions and they're roughly the same size, don't make it too messy, but you don't have to be like so hyper precise about this. I'm not grading anyone about exactly how true your measurements are. What this chart is looking to do, there's a certain type of logic to it here. So I'd like for you to go from left to right. I'd like for you to go light to dark, okay? And then from top to bottom, I'd like for you to go thin to thick, okay? From each of these, I would like for you to explore different types of lines that you can make. So don't just make the same line every time. Try to see what your options are out there, okay? So I'm just gonna start. I have a 2B pencil. It's a little dark for this, but let's stick with it. I'm kind of a fan of using less pencils. Any given art supply store, or if you're looking at supplies online, there are so many different types of pencil lead. This isn't the tutorial to go over all those, but 2B is like a nice standard medium dark pencil. But I'm kind of a fan of, instead of having all of the range of light and dark pencils, I'm a little bit more of a fan of having some of the range and then just adjusting your pressure. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to adjust my pressure, and I'm going to give myself a very light, might not even show up on this video here. I'll press down a little harder just so you can see it a little more on the video. And notice the type of line I'm making. It's kind of a swirly line, a kind of organic, free-flowing line. I'm going to make my way from left to right here. And again, you're not copying this. I'm just showing you some examples. So the next box over, I'm going to do something spiky, a little darker. Okay, So again, this kind of goes back to the design class. How many different types of lines can we make? Organic lines, geometric lines, or angular lines, if you will. I'm going to do a little bit of a combination of the two of those. I'm going to press down a little harder still, but I'm going to do something that's a little bit organic and a little bit spiky, right? It's got a little bit of an edginess to it, but it's also just a little bit curvy at times also. Okay, let's try something a little different on this other box over here. I'm going to stick with the thin lines, but I'm going to try something like dotted lines, dragged lines, stuttering lines, kind of letting my pencil skip around here. And think about how you're holding the pencil, because how you're holding the pencil is going to create, the way you hold the pencil is going to create different types of marks. So here's the kind of outlier here. We have these nice kind of fluid connected lines here, and then over here we have something a little different. So we have some implied lines. We have these kind of broken lines as well. And this is, again, it's not just one and done. I'd like for you to think about moving around back and forth as you work on this. So making my way down here, let's try to hold our pencil on the side. Now I'm just showing you that the tip of this pencil, right? If I draw this way, I'm going to get a little spiky mark. If I look at the edge, the broad side here, and I hold my pencil a little bit more parallel to the edge of the paper, notice how I get a much thicker line. Okay, now I'm trying to pay attention to staying light, and as you'll notice, I didn't do a very good job of that on this one. I got a little too dark. So what does that mean? It means I just need to take an eraser, a kneaded eraser. If you kind of dab it like that. The kneaded eraser is for gentle removal of lines. So I can add and I can subtract. Pink pearl eraser, or if you have a hard white plastic eraser, either of those, any of those more firm erasers are going to give you just a little bit more of an intense erase. They're a little bit better for things you really got to get off of your paper. They're also they're also nice for kind of, you can cut them with your X-Acto knife and you can draw lines with them. You know, you can erase lines with them as well. And the kneaded eraser also, you can use it kind of flat like I was just doing. And you can also take it and you could make little points with it, like this little situation, and you could draw by erasing. That's just called working reductively. You could do that as well. Let's switch our materials around here, because the point of this is experimenting. Besides drawing with the side of the pencil, which you will often need to do in your drawings in order to get a range of marks, let's bring in some other materials here. So I'm going to grab some charcoal. I'm going to use a little bit of this vine charcoal. Let's look at, let's knock this back, because you'll notice with the vine charcoal, I'd like for you to realize early on in the class here, some materials don't play very well with each other. Graphite and charcoal don't really work very well together. If I was to kind of shade this in with graphite, this is my 2B graphite, if I try to draw over that shaded in area with charcoal, it's going to make some marks, but it's going to wipe off very easily, and it's also going to kind of skip along the surface. The vine charcoal is a little more forgiving. If I was drawing with a charcoal pencil, it's just going to feel bad. It's not going to feel right. This actually kind of drew on there a little bit. The vine charcoal actually drew on that graphite a little bit. This charcoal pencil, which is the 2B General's charcoal pencil, it feels like I'm not getting any traction on there. It's just skipping along the surface. So I want you to kind of experiment with this mark making chart and see, realize some of these material incompatibilities. As you'll see with the vine charcoal, I have a broad side that I can draw with. Let's do that down here real fast. I'm going to skip ahead. Here's a very thick line. Woo. And thin line. Look at that. See, that's a good line. Woo. All right, look at that line. Great, fantastic. It's got texture, it's got movement, it's got variety. That is a line, right? We want these little thin puny lines to have a little bit of that, extra special flair to them, right? Like if you were to zoom in on any of these thin lines at the top, you kind of would want to see this through a microscope, just like a really dynamic, interesting line. So let's jump back to this one, because if you try to draw with a point on the vine charcoal, you'll see this line is just going to be thicker no matter what. because vine charcoal is just kind of like that. You hear that sound? Right? You want your drawing materials to talk to you. You want them to make some noise. You want to experience everything about the drawing materials, the sounds they make, the smells they have. You also want to see things like this, how easy vine charcoal wipes off. Okay, now that's not a bad thing. That's actually a great way to get your hands dirty. It's also a great way to knock something back really quickly and try it again. You see how the top row is kind of looking boring now? And like now we're getting to the party. This is like a little bit more of the exciting part, the center and the bottom lines here. So what this is making me think is I want to go back to this top row and bring a little bit of this energy into it. I hope you can kind of see where we're heading with this mark making chart, okay? It's not a one-way street. It's not just boom, 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 12 boxes, I'm done. These are like different apartments in a building. And there's different characters that live in each one of these apartments. And we're trying to make them all very, very different from one another. The loud neighbors, the quiet neighbors, the neighbors who are arguing, the neighbors you never see, you know. So let's kind of leave that for now. Let's keep making our way across here. Let's go back to that spiky line. This one was spiky. Sorry, spiky was here. Whatever, we can mix them all up. Let's mix them all up. Look at that, nice line. Here's the bad thing about charcoal: it's super messy. The great thing about it: lots of character, lots of energy, lots of movement. Let's make this one a little different. I'm gonna shade in this side. I'm gonna do a half and half thing here. Now, if you blow that in your house, I'm in a garage space here, so I can kind of do that. If you blow that and you got white carpet, you're gonna be in big trouble. So just be mindful of the materials here. And I recommend work somewhere where you can make a mess. And if you're in a room that you can't make a mess, lay out, one thing you could do is if you have like a plastic shower curtain liner that you're going to replace soon or something like that, lay a big sheet of plastic down or some kind of drop cloth, lay down something that will protect your surfaces so you can just work without, worrying about making a mess. So here I added a little bit of tone over here. Let's come in with a line. I'm going to use the pointy edge of my eraser here and draw a medium weight line because I'm on the middle row, which is supposed to be the kind of medium weight lines. We have the thin lines on the top and the thick lines on the bottom. So you see what's happening here? I'm getting a little bit of a night and day situation. I could even try to connect some of these lines and make them look like they're actually disappearing into this darker area and reappearing again. Now, a couple other things I want to say about this. These materials will smudge very easily, as you just saw. You can buy a fixative like this. It smells terrible. Never use it if you don't have proper ventilation. If you're going to spray your drawing with this, spray it outside. You can also just buy spray-on hairspray at Safeway or whatever. So you can also just spray this with some Aquanet hairspray. So you can get your materials to stick to the paper and you can actually draw over them again. Also, another thing to note is if you have vine charcoal, let me just show you a quick thing here since we're just exploring the materials. Zoop, zoop, zoop. Here's your little vine charcoal. This is just with a spray bottle. Oops. I'm just going to dab this so it's not quite as wet. Something that is kind of an interesting quality about vine charcoal is that you can wet it and it'll smudge a little bit from being wet, but it actually then soaks into the paper and it doesn't keep smudging like it would if it was unfixed. So another thing to consider is just having like a brush around. This is a very soft, gentle brush here. I could use something like that. And if I was okay with a little bit of smudging, right, like that. See, I don't know if you can see that on there, but this whole area is wet now. But you can see how I'm going over it with the brush, and it's not continuing to smudge. So that's another thing I would like for you to experiment with. What happens if these materials get wet? You know, what happens with vine charcoal when it gets wet, or graphite, or really you're welcome to use any materials you want to explore on this mark making chart. Let's stay in this box. This is a blending stump. Hello to your friend, the blending stump. You can take this and you can get a little charcoal on it just by taking your charcoal pencil and rubbing it onto a sheet of paper. So you create a little kind of a, think of this like your paint that you're painting with, and you kind of dip your paintbrush, so to speak, into there. Now I'm going to make a line with this blending stump. So you'll notice what's happening is I get a very soft, super soft line there. It looks almost like a digital line. And I'm gonna make this even softer still. I'm gonna show you a different way you could do this. I believe it is called a soft knife. Okay, this is made by, I believe this is made by Pastel. It's the same company that makes these little pastels, powdered pastels. You can dip your soft palette knife in there. I think they're just called soft knives. And you can actually, since this is a much bigger surface, let's push this down to the bottom here. Ooh, look at that. Ooh, super soft. I would challenge you while you're working to see if some of these lines can go around each other. Go around this way, maybe it disappears underneath. Maybe it comes through here. Maybe it jumps back over top. Maybe it goes under here. You see what I'm doing? Playing little games with the lines. Okay, so there's so many ways to approach this, and if you're like, hey, I don't have that thing, that's fine too, because you could go to another very refined art store called Trader Joe's. You can buy a pack of these sponges, the dish sponges, and you could do the same thing I did here, especially if you don't have something like this. Just give yourself some charcoal onto your paper and then rub the sponge in there, and then come back to your mark making area. Let's do something nice and thick but a little lighter like this. Remember, this is the light side on the left side over here, but I also want the lines to be thick, so that seems to work out pretty well. And this is actually another fancy art supply store item, which is comes from CVS and Rite Aid, which is just a makeup brush, right? So I can actually take this and give myself some, let's see what it does. Let's just experiment here. Let's see what it does to the vine charcoal. It knocks it back as you would expect. But we also can probably, let's see what happens. Oh yeah, look at that. We can also, so let's go ahead and go really thick and really dark. Let me grab, this is a chunk of compressed charcoal. You could also use Pastel. You could also use Conte. Let's get really dark, really thick. Whoosh. Let's do some of those stippled lines I did up there, but let's do it with this big chunky piece. And then let's take this makeup brush again, and let's see what happens. You see how it's just kind of softening it down here? And it's giving me a little bit of tone in the background. Actually, I'm going to do it everywhere. Let's do it everywhere in this square. So what that tone does is it gives me another opportunity to work with my eraser. So now I'm back to, let's go back to the pink eraser. Let's shoot a line straight through here. It's going to zip on top of this. It's going to disappear underneath this drawn line. It's going to come out here. Let's tie another line through here. I feel like I'm passing some strings or some thread through something. There we go. Let's do another one. Zip, zip, zip. Now, again, with all of these, I'm not asking you to copy what I'm doing at all. I'm just trying to give you some ideas, like really grab what's around you. You don't have a makeup brush, grab something else. Grab a broom, grab a, an old sponge. Look around your house, look under the sink. You might have some interesting things, but cosmetic wedges, why I was looking for one of those is they give you basically the same material that this soft knife has. It's almost the same kind of very super soft spongy material. So if you don't have these, but you want to experiment with something that gives you a mark like this, go grab a pack of cosmetic wedges at CVS or Rite Aid or whatnot. I'm looking back at that top row. The top row is super boring. Let's make the top row more like what's going on here. Doesn't mean I have to use charcoal, but I do think I need some more variety. The lines just look super boring. So I'm gonna erase some of these, something like that, something that starts to enliven the space a little bit. And I'd like to consider some of this idea of toning the ground a little bit, like we did with the graphite, sorry, the charcoal. Charcoal gives you this beautiful, I love charcoal, gives you a very beautiful warm gray. People who hate on graphite, I've heard one of the complaints is that you can have quite a shiny surface at certain angles when the light hits it. So I'm just shading up here because I want to put some of that tone, like I really like how this one turned out. So I'm going to put some of that tone up top. Let's shift pencils because I have a 6B. So I started with that 2B. 2B is lighter than a 6B. So I was going to grab the 6B and just use it. But you know what? Let's grab the 6B and the 2B. Let's come over here and hold both of these. They're friends now. Look at that. I want this to be darker. Look at that. Friends. Figure skating here. I'm staying thin, but I am getting darker, and I feel like I could get even darker than that. You know what I'm going to do if I'm interested in darkness up here, but I have to stay to this idea of thin at the top and thick as I move down. I can do something called cross-hatching, which is to say adding lines in one direction, like I'm doing. So cross-hatching says I have a bunch of lines moving in one direction. They're all parallel to each other. And then I'm going to have a bunch of other straight lines that are also parallel, moving at a right angle to those initial lines. And you'll see what's going to happen is there's going to be a kind of optical mix, meaning that when you step back from something that has cross-hatching, it's kind of like stepping back from an impressionistic painting, sort of, in that your eye in an impressionistic painting blends a yellow and a red to make an orange. Your eye's mixing that. That's called an optical mix. With this kind of thing, your eye is mixing these different, very tightly woven lines and will create different shades of gray or black. If you want to make it even darker, I'll just do this corner, focus on it darker. I can then turn it 45 degrees here so that I'm cutting through the center. So there's kind of a logic to the cross-hatching, and building up your value just depends on more and more of these parallel lines, straight parallel lines, overlapping each other at very intentional angles. I want to bounce back real quick to this one, and then we'll wrap up this little tutorial because I think this gives you, the point is not to watch me do this entire mark making chart. The point is just for you to get some ideas. Let's bounce back to this one real quick, thanks to those of you still watching. And I'm going to look at this fun. I'm going to add a little bit with my charcoal pencil, add a little bit of a drop shadow under this squiggle. Shadows are harder edge when they're close to something, softer edge when they're away from something. Let's make this shadow touch underneath the edge over here so it gets a little harder edge again. Let's do one over here that's hard edge because it's close, and then it's going to separate. I just wanted to show you how some of these lines together can just create so many different effects, so many different styles. The idea is to really sink some time into this. Each one of your 12 compositions could be enlarged with a grid or a projector and painted in oil paint, perfect squares, and you got 12 pieces. You have a solo show ready to go. I'd like for you to invest the amount of time into these that each one feels like its own completed investigation. Really, I don't want to inhibit your material exploration. So if you got an idea, and there's something near you that you want to try out, some unusual material, like I got a cup of coffee here. If I dipped my brush in a cup of coffee, you could paint. Let's end this by doing that. Let's go back to this one. Oh yeah, look at that. Anything goes. Anything goes. There we go. Nice. I hope that helped. Thanks for your patience in watching that. Okay, so here is our mark making chart, partially done, but hopefully this gave you some ideas of where you can take your mark making chart to. And just to remind you, the purpose of the mark making chart is to detach your drawing from a particular image and just free you to play with the materials. So this is, it takes the pressure off of you of getting everything just right, and it just opens you up to a kind of realm of play. I did want to show you really quickly. These are those cosmetic wedges I was talking about from CVS. So here's a cleaner one. Here's one 100% covered in charcoal. This one will erase a little bit more. This one already has some material on it. But this is kind of what they look like, and they come in packs that are all stacked together like that. So again, if you like that soft palette knife approach, but you don't want to get those online or whatever, you could probably walk over to a CVS or Rite Aid and pick these up. So anyways, that about does it. Good luck on your mark making chart. Thank you very much.